The great hall of the Zinari Empire shimmered with cold light. Rows of silver-armored guards stood still as the emperor announced his decision. His voice echoed across the marble floor, heavy and final. "Princess Alira," he said, his tone carrying the weight of command. "You are to marry the Human Alliance's chosen representative captain, Daniel Hayes. It is the will of the Empire and the path to peace." The words hit Alira like a blade. Her heart skipped a beat, but her face remained calm, trained by years of royal discipline. Marriage to a human. The very thought made her chest tighten. For generations, the Zinari had looked down on humans. They were seen as impulsive, emotional, and wild, a young species with too much heart and too little control. And now, she, a princess of the Empire, would be bound to one of them. Her father looked at her from his throne, his silver crown gleaming beneath the crystal lights. "You understand your duty, my daughter. This union will ensure peace between our worlds." Alira lowered her head. "Yes, father. I understand." But inside, her thoughts were a storm. She wanted to scream, to ask why she had to be the one sacrificed. Yet she knew the answer. She was not just a daughter, she was a symbol. To the Empire, her feelings didn't matter. Her life belonged to politics, not to herself. When the hall emptied and silence filled the air, Alira stood alone before the massive window of her chamber. Beyond it stretched the endless darkness of space, dotted with distant stars. Each star shimmered with light. Each one home to a different world. And somewhere among them was Earth, the human world. Humans, she thought. What kind of creatures were they really? The stories said they were brave, stubborn, and too emotional. They fought for things they believed in, even when logic told them to stop. Some called that strength. Others called it foolishness. She didn't know what to believe. A soft chime broke her thoughts. The palace attendant entered, holding a glowing data tablet. "Your Highness," he said gently, "the human captain will arrive within 2 days. Preparations for the ceremony have begun." Alira nodded, her voice quiet. "Very well." When the attendant left, she sank into her chair, her long silver hair falling over her shoulders. Her reflection in the glass looked more like a stranger than a princess. "Marry a human," she whispered to herself. The words sounded foreign in her mouth. Her people would talk. Some would pity her. Others would call her a hero for peace. But none of them would understand what it felt like to have her fate written by others. To walk into a bond she didn't choose. That night she couldn't sleep. The cold moons of Zinar cast pale light across her room. She thought about her mother who had died years ago and the stories she used to tell. Stories of love that grew in the most unexpected places. Her mother once said, "Love is not always chosen by the heart, or by blood, it's chosen by kindness." But Alira didn't believe that now. Kindness was a rare thing in the world of politics. As the stars shifted outside her window, she imagined what her future would be like. A life beside a human, a stranger she had never met. Would he be cruel? Arrogant? Would he look at her as an alien to conquer, or as a wife to endure? She pressed her palm against the cold glass, her breath leaving a faint mark. No matter what, she promised herself one thing: she would not let him see her weakness. She would wear her crown with pride, even if her heart was breaking. The night stretched on, silent and endless. Far beyond the palace walls, a human ship was already traveling toward her world. Carrying the man who would change her fate forever, Princess Alira didn't know it yet. But this human, this Captain Daniel Hayes, would not come to conquer her world, nor to claim her power. He would come with something far stronger than politics or treaties. He would come with kindness, and that single, fragile thing would shake the walls of empires. The next morning, the sky above Zinar shimmered with a strange light. A human ship, large and metallic, broke through the clouds like a falling star. Its engines roared softly as it landed on the royal platform. From her balcony, Princess Alira watched it descend. Her heart beat faster than she wanted to admit. So this was at the beginning of her new fate. Guards lined the pathway, banners of both worlds flying side by side. The sound of drums echoed through the courtyard. Every Zanari noble was present to witness the arrival of the man who would soon be their royal consort. The ship's doors opened slowly, and out stepped Captain Daniel Hayes. He looked nothing like she had imagined. He wasn't covered in armor or decorated with jewels. Instead, he wore a simple dark blue uniform, the symbol of the human alliance glowing faintly on his chest. His short brown hair was slightly messy, his jaw strong but kind. His eyes, brown like autumn leaves, carried no arrogance, only quiet strength. He stopped halfway down the steps and looked directly at her. Alira felt something strange in that gaze. It wasn't the stare of a soldier or a conqueror. It was simply human. When he finally reached her, he bowed deeply. "Princess Alira of the Zanari Empire," he said, his voice calm but steady. "It's an honor to meet you." His accent was soft, his tone respectful. Alira hesitated for a moment, unsure how to respond. Then, in the most formal tone she could manage, she replied, "Captain Hayes, the Empire welcomes you." He smiled slightly, not out of pride but warmth. "Please, call me Daniel." That small smile unsettled her. It wasn't fake or practiced. It felt genuine, and that made her uneasy. Later that day, they walked together through the royal gardens. The air was filled with glowing blue flowers that responded to touch. Alira kept her hands behind her back, maintaining the proper distance of royalty. Daniel, however, knelt beside one of the flowers, his eyes full of wonder. "They move when you get close," he said, watching as the petals glowed brighter. "It's beautiful." "Do they react to emotions too?" Alira tilted her head. "You ask too many questions for a soldier." He laughed quietly. "I guess curiosity is a human weakness." She wanted to reply sharply, but the way he said it with humor, not pride, softened her tone. "Curiosity can be dangerous," she said finally. "And sometimes," he replied, "it saves lives." For a moment, neither spoke. The breeze carried the faint hum of distant music. Alira looked at him, trying to understand why this human spoke as if every word came from the heart. Most men she'd met were trained to hide feeling behind status and power, but Daniel wore his humanity openly like armor that could not break. That evening, a dinner was held in the great hall. Alira sat beside him at the long table, surrounded by nobles whispering in secret. She could hear the judgment in their tones, see the disapproval in their eyes. A Zanari princess beside a humanite was unthinkable. Daniel, however, seemed completely at ease. He thanked the servers, complimented the food, even made one of the older nobles laugh. His kindness wasn't forced. It was natural. Lyra studied him quietly. Why wasn't he trying to impress her? Why wasn't he acting superior like most diplomats did? Halfway through the dinner, she realized she was actually a tiny one, but it was there. When the guests finally left, Daniel stood and bowed slightly. "I know this isn't easy for you," he said softly. "You didn't choose this." "Neither did I, but I hope, at least, we can treat each other with kindness." His words surprised her. They weren't filled with duty or politics, just honesty. And in that honesty, she felt something shift inside, hurl like the faint crack of a frozen wall beginning to melt. "Kindness," she repeated quietly, testing the word. A strange concept for a soldier. He smiled again, gentle and sincere. Maybe that's why it matters so much. When he left the hall, she remained standing by the window, watching the stars rise above the city. For the first time, she didn't feel anger or fear about what was coming. Instead, she felt something new, something small, uncertain, and warm. Hope. And though she didn't know it yet, that single spark would change everything. The day of their wedding came faster than either of them expected. The palace was alive with light, banners of gold and blue waving in the wind. From the balconies, nobles and soldiers watched in silence as two very different worlds prepared to unite. Alira stood before the mirror, dressed in a gown of white silk that shimmered like moonlight. A thin crown of silver rested on her head, and her long hair was braided with small glowing crystals, the traditional sign of a royal bride. Yet, when she looked at herself, she didn't see a bride. She saw a prisoner in a beautiful cage. Her attendant adjusted her veil. You look radiant, Your Highness. Lyra gave a faint smile. Perhaps, but radiance cannot hide what the heart feels. Outside, the music began, deep drums from Zinar, soft strings from Earth, the sound of two worlds trying to blend into one song. As she stepped into the hall, all eyes turned to her. At the end of the long path stood Daniel. He looked different today, dressed in a dark ceremonial suit, his hair neatly combed, his expression calm. But when his eyes met hers, he didn't look proud or nervous. He looked honest. For a moment, she forgot to breathe. When she finally stood beside him, the Grand Minister began to speak the words of union. Two hearts from distant stars joined for peace and hope. Two souls bound not by conquest, but by trust. Alira listened, but the words felt heavy, unreal. She had trained all her life to hide emotion, but when Daniel gently reached for her hand, his touch startled her. It wasn't firm or commanding. It was soft, respectful. He didn't grip her fingers. He simply offered his warmth. She looked up at him. He gave a small smile. Not the kind people wear for politics, but one that said, "It's all right. You're not alone." And for a heartbeat, she almost smiled back. When the ceremony ended, cheers filled the air. The Empire celebrated. The Alliance broadcasted the event across the galaxy. To the worlds, it was history. To Alira, it was just the beginning of a strange, uncertain life. Their shared quarters were prepared aboard the great ship Resolute, which would serve as their new home for a time, part of both worlds, belonging to neither when they entered. Daniel stepped aside, letting her go first. "After you," he said gently. She glanced at him. "You're very polite for a soldier," he chuckled. "It's easier than being rude." The room was quiet, filled with soft white light and the hum of engines far below. One side of the chamber had decorations from Zinar, elegant silver patterns and hovering lamps. The other side had Earth's touches, books, a small plant, and a framed picture of blue skies. Alira stood by the window, gazing out at the stars. "They say humans see beauty in everything," she said softly. "Even in chaos." Daniel joined her side, keeping a respectful distance. "Maybe that's because Earth had a lot of chaos," he replied. "We had to find beauty, or we'd lose hope." She turned her head slightly, studying him. "Hope, another word humans use too easily." He smiled faintly. "Maybe, but sometimes it's all we have." For days, their life moved in quiet rhythms. They spoke little, but shared space politely. Daniel would often read from his old books or played gentle human music that filled the room with warmth. Alira pretended not to listen, but sometimes late at night, she found herself listening closely to the lyrics. They spoke of love, loss, and the fragile strength of hearts. They made her feel things she couldn't explain. One evening, as he read aloud from a small paper book, she asked softly, "Why do you still use paper when you have digital texts?" He looked up and smiled. "Because paper holds memories. You can feel the story in your hands." That answer stayed with her. It was strange how his words always found a way into her thoughts. She had expected cruelty or arrogance, not kindness so quiet it could almost be missed. And in the stillness of that night, as the ship drifted through the endless dark, Princess Alira realized something she could not yet name. She still didn't love this human. But for the first time, she didn't hate him either. Something gentle had begun to grow between them. Not passion, not yet love, but a seed of understanding. And sometimes, even the smallest seed can change a whole world. Days turned into weeks aboard the great ship Resolute. The endless stars outside their window became part of their lives. Every day looked the same: cold steel walls, quiet corridors, and the soft hum of engines that sang a song of distance. Yet within that silence, something was slowly changing. Alira had started noticing small things about the human she once called strange. Daniel always woke early, making himself a drink he called coffee. The bitter smell filled the room every morning, sharp yet comforting. He would often offer her some, saying, "It helps you face the day." At first, she refused. Zenari didn't drink bitter things. But one morning she accepted just to see what he found so special about it. The taste made her frown instantly. "This is awful," she said honestly. Daniel laughed softly. "You'll get used to it. It's part of being human. We learn to like difficult things." She didn't admit it, but that line stayed in her mind all day. They spent more time together after that. Sometimes they walked through the observation deck, looking at the stars that glittered like rivers of fire. Daniel would point out constellations from Earth and tell stories about them, legends of heroes, love, and sacrifice. Elira listened quietly, pretending to be uninterested, but inside she was fascinated. Humans, she realized, looked at the universe with such wonder. They didn't see emptiness. They saw possibility. Her people had studied the stars for knowledge. Humans looked at them for hope. One evening, as they stood by the window, Daniel said, "Do you know why humans love the stars so much?" Elira shook her head slightly. "Because they are far away?" He smiled. "Because they remind us that even the smallest light matters in the dark." Those words hit her heart like a gentle strike. She looked at him for a long moment and said softly, "That is beautiful." He didn't reply, but the smile he gave her was full of warmth, the kind that didn't fade easily. Their bond grew quietly in small ways. When she struggled to learn his language's idioms, he would laugh, not in mockery, but in patience. When she fell sick from the change in gravity, he stayed beside her bed the entire night, bringing her medicine, adjusting her blanket, and whispering softly, "It's okay, I'm here." She woke once to find him asleep in the chair, his head resting against the wall, his hand still near hers. Her chest ached with something she couldn't name. For the first time in her life, someone had cared for her without duty, without expecting anything in return. When he woke up, she asked quietly, "Why did you stay?" He smiled, tired but sincere. "Because you looked like you needed someone there." Her voice trembled. "You didn't have to," "I know," he said softly, "but I wanted to." Something inside her melted then, something she had kept locked for years behind walls of pride and fear. Over time, Elira began to smile more. Small smiles, gentle ones, that only Daniel ever saw. She started sharing stories about her childhood, about the glowing lakes of Zinar, and how she used to sneak out of the palace to watch the moons. Daniel listened to every word, his eyes warm and focused, as if her memories were treasures. In return, he told her about Earth, the blue oceans, the green forests, and the music that filled every street. He spoke of kindness, of people who gave even when they had little. Elira listened in silence, her heart learning something new, what humans called emotion. One night, she stood alone by the window, watching the stars drift by. She thought about how much she had changed since the day she met him. The anger, the fear, it was still there, but softer now. Daniel had not forced her to trust him. He had earned it with patience, with care, with small acts of goodness. As she turned, she found him standing behind her, holding 2 cups of that strange bitter drink. "For you," he said, smiling. "Extra sweet this time." She took it carefully, her fingers brushing against his. For a second, neither moved. The moment felt fragile, like glass. "Thank you," she whispered. He nodded, his voice low. "Any time, princess." She looked into his brown eyes and felt something she couldn't control, a warmth that reached deeper than duty. She didn't yet understand it fully, but she knew one thing. The human she was ordered to marry was no longer a stranger. He was becoming the light in her endless dark. The days on the Resolute had grown peaceful. Too peaceful. Elira had almost started to believe that maybe, just maybe, her strange new life could stay that way. But peace rarely lasts. Especially between 2 worlds built on fear, it began one quiet night. The stars outside shimmered softly as the ship drifted through space. Elira was reading one of Daniel's books, the one about the little prince who searched for love among the stars. She smiled faintly at how human stories always carried hearts full of hope. Then the alarm broke the silence. A sharp, loud siren filled the halls. Red lights flashed through the corridor. Daniel burst into the room, already in his uniform. "Elira, get down," he shouted, rushing to the window. Outside, several small ships approached, their weapons glowing bright. Illyra's heart raced. "Who are they?" "Rebels," Daniel said, checking his blaster. "Zenari extremists. They don't want peace. They want you dead." Before she could reply, the first explosion hit. The ship shook violently, throwing them both to the floor. The lights flickered, and the smell of burning metal filled the air. Daniel grabbed her hand. "Stay behind me." But Illyra was not a helpless princess. Her eyes glowed faintly as she activated her Zenari shield, a sphere of blue energy surrounding them. The next blast struck the wall, sending sparks flying, but the shield held. Daniel looked at her in surprise. "Remind me never to make you angry," he said with a quick grin. Even in the middle of chaos, she almost laughed, but fear took over as the door slid open. 3 armed assassins stormed in, their faces hidden behind masks of steel. "Target identified," one said coldly. "Eliminate the traitor and the human." Before Illyra could react, Daniel fired first. His shots were fast and sharp, hitting one attacker in the chest. But the others fired back. A bolt of plasma grazed Daniel's shoulder. He grunted in pain but kept fighting. "Daniel," she cried, rushing to him. He pulled her behind a console. "I'm fine. Stay low." Blood soaked through his sleeve, dark and deep. Yet he didn't stop. He turned, fired again. Protecting her like his life meant nothing compared to hers. The last assassin charged forward, swinging a glowing blade. Illyra stood up without thinking. Her eyes blazed with fury, and she raised her hands. Light burst from her palms, sending the attacker crashing into the wall. When it was finally over, smoke filled the room. The alarms were still ringing, but the gunfire had stopped. Daniel collapsed to one knee, holding his arm, his face pale. Illyra ran to him. "You're bleeding." You saved me," he smiled weakly. "Couldn't let them hurt you, princess?" Peace talks would get messy. Tears blurred her vision. "You fool," she whispered, pressing her glowing hands over his wound. "You risked your life for me." He looked up at her, his voice soft. "You're worth it." Those 3 words hit her harder than any weapon ever could. Her power glowed brighter as she healed him, her light surrounding them both. His wound began to close slowly, leaving a faint scar. She could feel his heartbeat through her hands, strong, steady, real. When the healing finished, she sat back, trembling. You could have died." Daniel smiled faintly. "I've faced worse, and quieter, but this time I had something worth protecting." Her chest tightened painfully. She wanted to speak, but no words came. The emotion inside her was too big, too raw. For the first time, she realized she wasn't just grateful. She was afraid of losing him. Hours later, after the attack ended, medics came, and the ship's systems stabilized. But Illyra stayed beside Daniel the whole night as he rested. The wound might have healed, but the image of him bleeding because of her stayed burned in her mind. She sat by his bedside, her hand resting near his. "You saved my life," she whispered, voice trembling. "But you also saved something. I thought I'd lost my heart."
How?
Daniel's eyes opened slightly. He gave her a weak smile. "Guess that makes us even." She laughed softly through her tears. "No, Captain. It means I owe you everything." Outside the window, the stars glowed quietly. And as Illyra looked at the man who had nearly died to protect her, she realized something powerful. The bond between them was no longer born of duty or peace treaties. It was born of love. The ship Resolute drifted quietly now. Far from the chaos that had almost destroyed it, the attack had ended, but its impact lingered like a shadow in every hallway. Illyra sat beside Daniel's bed, her silver eyes fixed on his sleeping face. His shoulder was bandaged, his skin pale, but his breathing was steady. She had healed his wound, yet her heart still ached. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw him throwing himself in front of her, without hesitation, without fear. Why would he do that for her? She had been his mission, his duty, not his love. But maybe, she thought, humans didn't need reasons to be kind. Her hand gently brushed his fingers. His warmth comforted her more than she wanted to admit. A soft knock on the door broke the silence. When she opened it, a hollow projection flickered to life, the Council of Zinnar. Her father's image appeared at the center. Tall, proud, and cold as stone. "Illyra," the Emperor said sternly, "we have been informed of the attack. You are unharmed?" "Yes, father," she replied quietly. "Thanks to him?" She looked at Daniel, sleeping peacefully. The Emperor's tone sharpened. "You mean the human? We've received reports that he used violence against Zinari citizens. That cannot be forgiven. You must return home immediately. The marriage treaty will be reviewed. Your duty to the Empire is not over." Her heart pounded. "You call them citizens," she said softly, "but they were assassins. They came to kill me and him, and he risked his life to protect me." Her father's eyes narrowed. "He is a human, Illyra. Their kind act from emotion, not loyalty. You are a princess, not a creature of feeling. You will return now." Something inside her broke then, not out of anger, but awakening. For years she had obeyed orders, accepted her fate, and silenced her own heart. But not this time. She lifted her chin. "No, father. I will not return," the council murmured in shock. The Emperor's voice turned cold. "You defy your own blood?" Illyra's voice trembled, but her resolve stood firm. "I defy fear. I defy hatred. You told me peace required sacrifice, and I agreed. But I will not sacrifice the only man who ever treated me as more than a symbol." Her father's expression darkened. "You shame your family." "No," she said softly. "I honor what peace truly means." The connection cut, leaving the room in heavy silence. Illyra stood still, her heart racing. She had just gone against the most powerful man in her world. There was no turning back now. When Daniel woke later, she was still there. He blinked, confused. "Did I sleep through a war?" She smiled softly. Almost. He tried to sit up, but she stopped him gently. "Don't move too much." He looked at her carefully. "Something's wrong." "What happened?" She hesitated, then told him everything: the council, her father, the threat of exile. When she finished, Daniel sat quietly, his expression unreadable. "You stood against them." "For me," Illyra nodded slowly, "I had to. They don't understand you, your people, your heart. But I do now." He shook his head slightly. "You could lose everything, Illyra." Her voice softened. "Then let it be lost. What good is a crown if it means living without choice?" Daniel looked at her, his brown eyes filled with something deep and unspoken. "You'd give up your world for me?" She smiled through the tears in her eyes. "I'd give up the world that never let me live." For a long time, neither of them spoke. The hum of the ship surrounded them like a heartbeat. Then Daniel reached for her hand, their fingers intertwining gently. "Illyra," he whispered, "you don't owe me anything." She shook her head. "It's not about owing. It's about feeling. You taught me that kindness is not weakness. You showed me what it means to be free." Later that night, she stood beside him at the observation window. The stars outside burned brighter than ever before, countless lights scattered across the dark. She leaned her head against his shoulder, feeling his steady warmth. "Do you think they'll come for us?" Daniel asked quietly. "Maybe," she said, "but they won't find what they're looking for." He smiled faintly. "What will they find then?" Her eyes shimmered with emotion. Two people who chose love over fear. The stars reflected in her eyes like silver tears. In that moment, Illyra was no longer a princess, no longer a pawn. She was simply a woman, brave, free, and in love with the human who had taught her the meaning of compassion. And though the future ahead was uncertain, she felt no fear anymore. Because love, she realized, was the greatest rebellion of all. The stars outside the viewport drifted slowly, each one a silent witness to the story unfolding aboard the Resolute. Illyra and Daniel had spent the night together, not in luxury or comfort, but in quiet peace, something both of them had almost forgotten how to feel. For a few brief hours, the galaxy seemed still. But peace in the stars never lasted long. When morning came, the alarms broke the silence. A Zinari battlecruiser had entered orbit. Its insignia flashed cold and familiar, the imperial crest. Her father had sent soldiers. Illyra felt her heart tighten. She had expected this, but still, the sight of her people's warship sent a deep ache through her chest. "They're here," Daniel said quietly, checking the scanners. "They're not firing." "Yet they won't," she said softly. "Not until they speak to me." Transmission came through moments later. "Princess Illyra of Zinar," a deep voice said, "you are ordered to surrender yourself for trial. The human is to be detained for questioning." Daniel gave a bitter laugh. "Yeah, I can guess what questioning means." Illyra didn't answer. Her hands trembled, but her eyes were calm. She had made her choice. They met on the command deck, her standing tall in her silver armor. Daniel beside her in a simple flight jacket. The screen flickered, revealing her father's face again. His expression was stern, but behind his eyes there was a hint of sadness. "Illyra," the Emperor said, his voice softer this time, "you can still come home. We can forgive this mistake. But you must abandon this human." Illyra's throat tightened. "He is not a mistake, father. He is the only thing that made this alliance real." "You have been deceived by emotion," he replied sharply. "Love is not what binds nations. Power does." Daniel stepped forward. "Then maybe your empire's weaker than you think," he said quietly. The Emperor's eyes darkened. "Human, you know nothing of strength?" Daniel smiled faintly. "I know enough. Real strength isn't ruling with fear. It's standing by someone even when the whole universe tells you not to." For a long moment, no one spoke. Even across the cold light of the holoscreen, Illyra could feel her father's silence, heavy, thoughtful, broken. Finally, the Emperor sighed. "You are your mother's child," he said softly. She too believed love could conquer politics. His eyes turned hard again, but love did not save her. Tears burned in Illyra's eyes. "Maybe not," she whispered, "but it can save what's left of me." The screen went dark. The battlecruiser did not move. Minutes passed, each one a lifetime. Then, slowly, the warship turned. Its engines flared, and it drifted away into the distant void. Daniel blinked in disbelief. "Did he just let you go?" Illyra nodded, though her eyes shimmered with tears. "He let me live my truth. That's the only blessing I ever asked from him." She felt the weight of generations lift off her shoulders. For the first time in her life, she was free not because someone gave her permission, but because she had chosen to be. Weeks passed. The Resolute became their home. Together, they drifted across the edges of known space, helping stranded travelers, rebuilding broken satellites, and sending messages of peace to the world still at war. Daniel repaired ships by day and cooked strange human meals by night. Illyra would laugh every time he burned something, which was often. But each laugh was real. Every moment was honest. One evening, as they stood beneath a window of stars, Daniel reached into his pocket. His voice was quiet, uncertain. "Illyra," he said, "I don't have a crown or a title, but I have this." He opened his hand, a small silver band, simple and beautiful. "I made it from the old hull plates," he said shyly. "I thought maybe you'd wear it." Tears filled her eyes. "It's perfect," she whispered. "No empire could make something more precious." He smiled. "So, does this count as a proposal?" She laughed softly, then nodded. "It does, and this time, it's my choice." He slipped the ring onto her finger. Outside, the stars seemed to shine brighter, as if the universe itself was smiling. From that day on, they became more than fugitives or symbols of rebellion. They became a story, whispered across colonies, retold among traders and dreamers. The tale of a Zanari princess who chose love over duty, and the human who showed her what it meant to be alive. And though they had no throne and no crown, they ruled something far greater, the space between two hearts that had once belonged to different worlds, now beating as one.